What's up guys, you're watching Life ITCG. Got a video for you today on Flesh and Blood Classic Constructed. This is on a pretty novel build that I'm playing of this hero Vynnset Iron Maiden. The build that I'm using right now, it's using a two-handed weapon. So it's not playing the Vynnset signature weapon, the Flail of Agony. And that's a very unusual thing, right, for this hero to be doing. Basically every stock list is playing Flail, but I don't think this is like a meme build or anything. I think there's like legitimate reasons to seriously consider not using Flail, and I'll explain the logic behind that in this video. So Vynnset is kind of a weird hero. It's pretty constrained in the way that it plays, the fact that you have to banish a card from your hand every turn. So in general, like exchanging a normal card for one rune chant is a bad trade. Like if your deck had like Sink Below or Command and Conquer or whatever in it, like you wouldn't want to remove those cards from the game just to make one rune chant. It wouldn't be worth it. So to get around that, what you have to do is you have to play the Blood Debt Runeblade cards in your list somewhere, so that when you banish them, you can play them from your banish zone, and you aren't wasting the value of an entire card that you're banishing every turn. So this leads to two kind of problems, or like other constraints that you have to think about when you're building the deck. The first problem is that you're not always going to be able to play every card that you banish with Blood Debt every single turn. Like a relatively common situation is you banish Deathly Whale, a 3-cost RuneGate card, on a turn where you don't have 3 rune chants, right? That can happen as easy as turn 1, right? You start the game with no rune chants. Start of the turn, Vynnset gives you 1 rune chant. If you have to banish a Deathly Whale, you won't be able to play it. So then the next turn starts, you want to banish another Blood Debt card, because again, it's still true that you don't want to waste your Vynnset triggers banishing normal cards. You don't want to banish like a random defense reaction or something just to get 1 rune chant. So you already have 1 Deathly Whale in the banish zone. Now your next turn you're banishing another RuneGate card. So unless you have some way to get 2 RuneGate cards out of your banish zone in 1 turn, you're going to be taking at least 1 Blood Debt damage for the rest of the game. So it's really important to the deck that you have some way to do this, some way to play multiple Blood Debt cards in 1 turn, so you can clear your banish zone and stop taking Blood Debt damage. But the other thing about this, too much Blood Debt, you want to avoid that. So the other thing about this problem though is that even if hypothetically you could reliably play 1 Blood Debt card every single turn and thus totally avoid taking Blood Debt damage, so like every single turn, how that would look like is you like play 1 Blood Debt card, then you play some effect that gives you like a few rune chants. Then next turn you play another Blood Debt card along with some effect that gives you a few rune chants, and you just keep doing this cycle over and over for the whole game. And that, in that case, you would never ever take any Blood Debt damage because you're playing your 1 Blood Debt card every single turn. But even if you could reliably do this, the problem is that a lot of the time you wouldn't actually want to, because if you do this gameplay loop, like what's happening basically is you're attacking for like 6 plus maybe a little bit if you like buff it with the envelop. This Deathly Whale can be smaller than the red one, right? So it can be even less than that. So you're sending like 3 or 4 rune chants and you're attacking for, we'll say like 7 to 8-ish on average maybe. So if your opponent has like block 3s and blues to pitch to Arcane Barrier, like they can just spend their entire turn dealing with this really easily. And they're pitching cards to deal with your arcane damage, but all of these cards are being used up and running out and banished. So if you do play like this against like Guardian, for example, like you will just guaranteed to get fatigued really easily. Like you don't want to be doing this like, oh, I'm just playing my 1 Blood Debt card every turn. You want to be able to use your banish zone as like a second arsenal and stock up on Blood Debt cards, then play them all in one turn for like a big burst of damage. So this is like two separate reasons why you need to be able to play multiple Blood Debt cards in one turn. Firstly, because they can end up there by accident if you have like a brick turn where you couldn't play your Blood Debt card even though you wanted to. And the second reason is that sometimes you want to do that on purpose. You want to like stock up cards in your banner zone and then like unload them all at once so that you can overwhelm your opponent's defense. So the way to solve this problem, which is like sort of obvious I suppose, is that you have to be able to have Blood Debt cards in your banner zone that have Go Again somehow, so that you play one of them, you get another action point, and then you can play the other one and empty out your banner zone and deal a ton of damage all in one turn. So how would you do that? What effects are you playing that have Go Again? So the first one is to play an attack that just has Go Again, like a Runegate card that just has Go Again naturally. Most people don't play these, I don't think. They're like, the reason is pretty obvious, which is that if you play Rift Skidder as like your first attack in the turn, so you could take advantage of the Go Again, it sends all the rune chants from this attacking. Now when the Go Again gives you another action point, you have no more rune chants anymore. So if you have other Runegate cards in your banner zone that you want to play, like Deathly Whale or Phantom Wraith or something, even though you have the Go Again from this Rift Skidder, you can't play those unless you like Spellbound Creepers or Read the Runes or something. So in general, like attacks with Runegate and Go Again don't really work. That's not an option that I think anybody really uses. Another pretty good option that's available is Funeral Moon, which doesn't technically have Go Again, but it's very easy to play it out of your banner zone as an instant that doesn't cost you your action point. The downside for Funeral Moon is it's very low impact as a card. I sort of mentioned at the start, like banishing an entire card, like a normal card, like an Enlightened Strike or a Sink Below or something, just to get one rune chant is not really worth it. But if you banish your Funeral Moon and play it from your banner zone, like all you're getting out of that is just one extra rune chant, so the upside's not really that high. But because this is so flexible, because it can do that, it can clear your banner zone easily, you can use it to pay life to like trigger your Deathly Whales, and it's a 3 block. Like most lists I think are playing like 2 or 3 copies of this, and I agree, I think Funeral Moon's pretty good. But the problem is that you can only play 3 Funeral Moon in your deck, right? So overall, to solve this problem of unloading our banner zone, we're going to need to look for some more options, and the Funeral Moon definitely doesn't solve the like anti-guardian problem of being able to stock up on a bunch of damage and unload it all at once. So the next option that is really, really common for most people to play is these non-attack actions that give your attack actions Go Again. So if you have like a Deathly Whale in your banner zone, you can play Morvian Skies or Shadow Puppetry. It will give that Deathly Whale Go Again. Then you attack with the Deathly Whale, and unlike the Rift Skidder scenario, when you attack with the Deathly Whale here, like if your Morvian Skies hits, you get rune chance, you can follow it up with another attack. If you pay life into the Shadow Puppetry, when you close the chain on your Deathly Whale, you'll get 2 rune chance, then you can play like a Deathly Delight or something. So it's much more feasible to play 2 attacks in one turn like this when you use these cards rather than the Go Again attack like a Rift Skidder or something. So usually it's really common for Vynnset lists to play these cards. Like pretty much every Vynnset list will play at least Shadow Puppetry plus like red Morvian Skies, and then sometimes even the yellow, and then sometimes even the blue Morvian Skies as well, just because it's so considered so good to have that effect available. And the final option for Go Again is just to play like a non-attack action that buffs one of your attacks. So there are lots of effects that do this, but the only real playable one I think is Putrid Stirrings. Like Seeds of Agony was banned in Classic Constructed in Flesh and Blood, but that was because Chain could put it into the Banish Zone for free just by milling it with the Soul Shackles. In Vynnset, your cards are only winding up on your Banish Zone. Usually, I mean, there's some exceptions like with Widespread Ruin or whatever, but usually your cards are only ending up in your Banish Zone because you banish them from your hand. And just like I keep saying, like one extra damage isn't really worth it, which is what Seeds of Agony does. But Putrid Stirrings can be like 5 damage. As a 3 cost, that's like slightly below rate. There's a lot of cards in Flesh and Blood, like Dread Screamer, things like this, where like 5 damage go again would be a 2 cost. But this is 3 block and it's not very situational, so it's not a bad option at all, I don't think. And it does solve that problem that you're looking for a solution versus like Bravo when you want to be able to do a bunch of damage all at once. If you have 1 or 2 Putrid Stirrings in your Banish Zone and you have 1 or 2 blues to pitch into them, all of a sudden you're doing like 15-20 damage turns, not too without too much difficulty. So that's exactly what you want. So yeah, so these are the 4 sort of categories of the different options you can play for solving this problem of playing multiple things out of your Banish Zone. Usually every Vynnset deck plays these Go Again enablers, the Skies and the Puppetry, plus Funeral Moon, and then maybe some number of Putrid Stirrings, either as like a wide thing versus a lot of matchups, or just to give that extra like damage burst versus Guardian. But I think that these category of cards in the bottom left here, the Morvrian Skies and the Shadow Puppetry, are actually quite bad. And the build that I'm using of Vynnset doesn't play any of these. I will explain that why in the next few slides. So the first problem with the Shadow Puppetry and the Morvrian Skies is they're both 2 blocks. That's not ideal, obviously. You want as many of your cards to block 3 as possible. Like if you look at Putrid Stirrings, that's a 3 block. Funeral Moon is a 3 block. Especially when these cards, they don't do anything together in multiples, like giving one of your attacks double Go Again doesn't do anything. That's just how Flesh and Blood works. So the fact that these are 2 blocks is really not ideal, because if you have 2 of these in your hand, you're going to be wanting to block with one of them, because you're only going to be using 1. And on my Talishar data, actually, with Shadow Puppetry in particular, I was blocking with it more than doing anything else with it. I was blocking with Shadow Puppetry more than I was pitching it, and more than I was playing it, which signals to me that like something is wrong. Like if you have this red 2 block in your deck and you're blocking with it more than you're playing it, that's an indication that somehow the deck is misbuilt or not working properly. So this is the first issue. The second issue is with Morvrian Skies in particular is that it's so easy to block. Like the best card to combine with the Morvrian Skies usually is like Deathly Whale. The red Deathly Whale has 6 power, which is not bad, but you have the blue and the yellow one in your deck as well, which is steadily getting worse. Now 5 power, now 4 power even on the blue one. If you're Morvrian Skysing these, it's very easy to block. You can't D-react, you don't have like breaking scales, or I mean some builds of Vynnset play Pummel, but not really anymore. I think people have sort of settled on the idea that that's too clunky. So if you Morvrian Skies an attack, like your opponent's just going to block it out, if they can. Like the ideal perfect scenario, which I've drawn in this diagram here, is that you Morvrian Skies your whatever, it hits, now you have 3 rune chance, and another action point you play your big attack from your Banish Zone. This is like a really sick, insane turn. But like often what actually happens is you play your Morvrian Skies on your Deathly Whale, whether it's the red or the blue or the yellow one, and they just block it. So now you have no rune chance from your Morvrian Skies. You're not getting any rune chance from closing the chain on your Deathly Whale, unless you also played like a Beseech the Demigod or something earlier in the turn as well. So now what do you do? Like, of course your only option here is just activate your Flail of Agony, and in this case that's not a bad like plan B if you already decided to put Morvrian Skies in your deck and your Deathly Whale got blocked. Like, it's obviously nice in this situation that Flail is the thing that you can use, but in this scenario, what's overall happening is that you're basically using your Morvarin Skies as a thing that, like, pays 1 life and generates some rune chance in combination with your Deathly Whale, which is fine if your Morvarin Skies is like a kind of like zero cost pseudo envelop in darkness thing that just like generates some rune chance for you. Um, but remember, the problem that we talked about at the start is that we're trying to clear out our banish zone of multiple cards with our Go Again Enabler, and in this situation you haven't achieved that. You've just generated some rune chance off of your Deathly Whale, which is nice, but that widespread destruction you had in the previous example that you could have played if your Morvarin Skies actually hit is now still stuck in your banish zone and blood deading you down. So that's bad. And like this always gets blocked. Like, I mean, and in the, okay, well, not literally always, but the thing is that in the matchups that are struggling to block your attacks, Vynnset is usually already favored anyway. The matchups where Vynnset has trouble is the matchups without like arcane burying all your rune chants and then jamming a bunch of 3 blocks and D-reacts in front of your stuff. And Morvarin Skies just makes this problem worse for exactly the reason I just explained, because it's bolting extra on hits on your stuff that's already not really hitting in the first place. So yeah, that's not ideal. Like, it's not solving the problem of helping you clear out your banish zone. It's just like an extra rune chant generator. The other problem with these two cards is that the Shadow Puppetry is slightly more consistent because it doesn't require a hit to generate rune chants off of Deathly Whale, because it itself is a shadow action. So when you play the Shadow Puppetry, you can pay life into Vynnset. Now, when your Deathly Whale attacks, your opponent's been hit by a rune chant for sure because it's unpreventable, and you also lost life from the Vynnset. So now when you close the chain, you have 2 rune chants guaranteed. Like, your Deathly Whale doesn't have to hit. Your opponent can't interact with this at all. But the problem now is that if you have a 3-cost thing in your banish zone, that's still stuck there because you only made 2 rune chants. If you attack with Flail here, it's going to send these 2 rune chants, which is possibly not what you want either, because that means you're going to have less rune chants available on the next turn when you want to play another rune gate thing again, like this widespread destruction, for example. So in this situation, it's only really good if you have 2-cost rune gates or less. And these cards aren't terrible. I mean, like, widespread ruin's pretty good. 6-power Phantom Wraith is like not bad. 2 for 6 in this situation, but like, to make this more consistent, you kind of have to go a bit further than that. People play like Deathly Delight, which is nice for the value potentially, like this 7 of value, but gaining life is not something this deck is very interested in because it wants to be like pressuring damage as much as possible, because it's usually not favored in games that go long. And then you have to start looking at cards like Bounding Demigod or things like that that are just overall much weaker. Like Bounding Demigod, that's like at most 4 damage. If you're playing the like blue Phantom Wraith, that's also 4 damage. Compared to like the red Putrid Stirrings, which is 5. That's the kind of situation this is forcing you into. Like, you have to put more low impact cards in your deck to make sure that you can dig them out of your banish zone with this play, which is not really something you're that interested in doing. You would much rather focus on playing like these high power effects every turn rather than having to dip into these much weaker cards that are getting you less impact per action point, basically. Yeah, so that's another issue. So my solution to this is that I'm not playing any of these Go Again cards, like 0 Morvarin Skies, not even the red one, 0 Shadow Puppetry. I'm only playing Funeral Moon and Putrid Stirrings to do this function of doing clearing my Banished Zone and stocking up damage for big turns. So importantly, what this means is that because you don't have the go again thing, you don't need to play Flail of Agony. Like, I'll just go back to the slide where I can look at the text on it. Like, this card would be a really bad weapon outside of the context of this specific play with the go again. Like, if you didn't have the go again, you're never going to be wanting to spend your entire turn on activating this. Because, like, both players, at best view, like, it hits both players losing a life. That's like an even trade. Like, you're sending the rune chant by attacking, so you're not even, like, going up in rune chants if it hits, and your opponent can just block it out with, like, Valiant Dynamo or yeah, like spending your entire turn to just deal 1 damage off this is like really bad. A lot of the strength of the other heroes in the game is that if you draw like a sort of clunky hand, like you always have the option of just pitching into attacking with your weapon. And while that might not be like the most amazing best turn in the game, it's much better play than just dinging with Flail as like your entire turn. The only reason why Flail is good is because you can go again into it, right? But if you don't have any of these go again cards because you've decided that they don't actually do that well in the role that you want them in your deck for, then you don't need to play Flail of Agony. Like, you can actually play one of these real weapons that are available for Runeblade. So like either one of these is probably the best one. Nebula Blade is often considered as like the other best option, but the problem is that Nebula Blade is also very dependent on these go again cards like Morvian Skies. Because if you don't have a lot of those go again non-attack actions, then you're not going to be able to attack with Nebula Blade when it has the buff on it, and when it only has 1 power, it's just not a very strong card. So, in summary, you don't have the need to play all of these like Phantom Wraiths and Deathly Delights in your deck. You can just play like max power, all of the like strongest Runegate attacks. Your deck becomes a bit better at blocking because you don't have all the 2 blocks in it, like the Skies and the Puppetry. This is a little bit debatable because you could argue that like the fact that you're cutting those cards means that you have to play more like Envelop and Darkness, which are also 2 blocks. But I think that you have more space for like D-reacts when you do this. So I think it does become a little bit better value like overall. And the Putrid Stirrings, for example, is a 3 block. You don't have to play the Flail of Agony. You can have like an actual weapon, which makes your off turns better, and it makes you much better overall versus fatigue. So I'll show you what the actual deck list of this looks like. So here's the equipment. I'm not 100% sure whether the weapon should be Dread Scythe or Reaping Blade. At the moment I'm on Dread Scythe and I think I like this. The reason is that because like in the late game, when you're into your pitch stack, it's going to have a lot of blues in it, usually, which means that spending 1 card, it can be a blue, which means you get more damage out of this Dread Scythe than the Reaping Blade. Reaping Blade is also kind of nice because you can activate it off Tunic and things like that, but the split damage of this, the like pseudo Kodachi effect that it has, like when your opponent's near death, they're going to have to pitch into Arcane Barrier to block the 1 Arcane coming off this, and they're also going to have to block the 3 power. You can sort of say that Reaping Blade does this effect a bit too, because you're going to have at least 1 rune chant every turn from the Vynnset trigger, meaning that when you attack with Reaping Blade, they're going to have to AB that 1 rune chant and also block the Reaping Blade as well. But the damage output of Dread Scythe per card that you pitch into it, assuming you can pitch a blue, is just higher, and I think that's better. But yeah, it's pretty close, I think. The both of them have a sort of like life gain denial effect, but they're both so marginal. I don't think it's ever worth considering. The the Reaping Blade is a bit of a non-bow with Deathly Delight, though. If you want to play those cards together, you just have to be a bit careful. But yeah, in every matchup except Kano, I think I'm playing all of these equipments. Oh, you might also want AB1 versus Runeblade Mirrors, but I'll get into that. So onto the list itself. So I have the 3 Putrid Stirrings, like I said, to help you clear out your Bannerstone and push damage. We have all 9 of the Deathly Whales, that's pretty stock for Vynnset. I'm playing all 9 Envelopment Darkness as well, just to make sure I have my Rune Chants available when I need them, and Shadow actions to trigger the Deathly Whales. And the blue Envelopment Darkness, usually that's considered maybe the weakest one, but because you have the out of pitching blues into this now, like blues with a kind of weak effect are sort of more valuable than they would be otherwise, so I think the blue Envelopment Darkness is fine. Then in terms of the rune chant generation, I'm playing 2 Blessing of Occult, 3 Runeblood Incantation, and 3 Sonata, the new one. I think this Sonata is really, really good. Having extra copies of Runeblood Incantation is great, and being able to use it to get Blessing of Occult in some situations is also really good, like towards the end of the game, when you'll want to push damage as soon as possible. You don't want to wait for your Runeblood Incantation to go off. This can be good. In a situation where you have a Sonata that you can play, but you already have a Runeblood Incantation in play anyway, then you often want to get this one just to clear it out of your deck, because you're going to have a few rune chants over the next few turns anyway from this Runeblood Incantation that you already have, and just clearing this out of your deck can be nice, because it's much worse to draw it than this one because it doesn't have go again. Yeah, I think you have to play at least one of these definitely, because otherwise your Sonatas run out of targets too easily. The second one's maybe optional, but I think 2 is better than 1, but it's a little bit difficult to evaluate. Also got the 3 Funeral Moon and the 3, all of the widespread cards. It's pretty stock for Vynnset. I'm playing the red reduced to rune chant, which is very stock. It's one of the best value cards you can play, just in terms of raw rate. Like, it blocks a 4. It's 0 to cast if you have a rune chant. Blocks for 4. Makes 1 rune chant, so that's 1 damage. But the way that the deck works, like, rune chants are also mana, or resources, I guess they're called in Fab, but I just always call it mana. So this is like 0 cost worth 5 life that also like gains you a mana. It's like almost like a tunic activation. So the rate on this card, the red one, is just insane. But like, I'm playing the yellow one as well, just because it's good enough for the same explanation. Like, 3 block plus 1 offense of damage off the rune chant, and then 0 cost potentially that also like gains you a mana. That rate is also totally worth it as well. Because you don't care about building your offense with the go again cards, like, you don't need to have so many like actions to save up for your own turn. You can play more defense reactions instead. Like at the end of the day, this is just a card that doesn't cost you an action point. It like makes a rune chant and like has value. Like, it's not really that different in spirit from a card like Morvrian Skies, if you sort of think about it sideways. I don't really know how to explain it, but it's just like way more consistent value that's like easier to use. I think if you build this deck this way, it actually like does make quite a lot of sense. Sink Below, some people don't play this card in Vynnset either. I think in Vynnset especially, like fixing your brick hands has a lot of value. Like the ability to loot away one card matters a lot more than it would in some other lists, because if you ever miss on like a Blood Debt card during your turn and you have to banish like a one of these or whatever to your Vynnset to make a rune chant, that's pretty bad. So having this card that's just a four defense that can cycle away your worst card and hope to like fix your hand. Because if you have a hand that's all RuneGate cards, that's also not very good. Because you can only play one of them. Like at best, you have to hope that you can pitch away the other one. So yeah, Sink Below I think is a very very strong card. It's why the deck basically has to play Crown of Providence. I mean, Crown is just a good card in Fab, and there's not a lot of other options that Runeblades can use. But the effect in this deck is super super strong, just because of how valuable it is for you to cycle cards away, because um, your hand need the right combination of like A plus B, B plus C in order to function. Crown is especially good because you have all these attack actions that are you ideally don't want to play them by pitching them because they're so expensive. Like you'd always rather RuneGate a Deathly Whale than hardcast it normally. Um, so if you ever end up arsenaling one of these, like this one's especially bad, right? Because it costs 4. Then being able to redraw that with Crown has so much value. So, and I think I've talked about every card in the main deck except for Phantom Banshee, the red one. When you don't have the go again and you're just playing one big attack every turn, you want that attack to be really big, and Phantom Banshee is just the biggest one. It's also nice that this is a 7 versus like Prism, because they have the Herald that shrinks the power of the thing that's blocking, so 6s don't pop it. But because this is a 7, that still works. Yeah, I haven't had any issues really being able to play this on time. So even though it costs 3, if you're afraid of this, you could play Deathly Delight or whatever instead. It's totally fine. But the higher damage output I think is really important for this deck, because you wanna end the game before you start running out of gas. Like this is a deck that really wants to be on the front foot. So I've been pretty happy with Phantom Banshee. And this 53 cards, I think I would use versus almost all opponents again, unless they're doing something really weird like Kano, where you have to board out some of these red D-reacts because they don't do anything. So then what other cards are we adding to bring this up to 60? In the sideboard, the 3 main cards here are Beseech the Demigod, Sigil of Suffering, and Chains of Methodist. So Beseech the Demigod and Sigil of Suffering are really straightforward. They're just like easy to play cards that have a lot of value. Like if you're trying to be aggressive, this is great. It's just 3 power go again that is a shadow action, so you can trigger your Deathly Whales and keep your rune chants flowing. And then in matchups where you're trying to be defensive, Sigil of Suffering is really good. If your opponent is like very red heavy, they're not going to want to spend an entire card just to Arcane Barrier this. And then if your opponent doesn't have Arcane Barrier at all, like most KOs I play against don't have any Arcane Barrier, this is just like 5 value on a D-React, which is excellent. But Chains of Methodist is a card that I'm boarding in versus a lot of people. So let's think about it. So versus Brute is probably the most obvious case at the moment. So Bloodrush Bellows out of Brute is like the most well-known card with the like draw discard effect on it that this interferes with. But KO has a ton of other options that do that, like Wild Ride. I think there's others as well that just off the top of my head I can't remember at the moment. Um, when you have chains in play, it makes it way more difficult for them to play any of these. Leviah doesn't always play all of those other cards. They're only usually on Blood Rush Bellow. But Leviah also has Art of War. It's an Art of War deck, so um, Chain stops the card draw from that as well. Prism, the new Prism build, is like very all in on a big combo turn with the Tome of Divinity. It's also drawing cards off of the Soraya Figment, the Angel of Erudition or whatever it is, to keep the ball rolling. Chains shuts that down as well. I think those are the main ones. I'm sure I'm forgetting something. Where's the Heroes tab? This is Azalea. It only stops Death Dealer, so that's not super interesting. This is Dromai, like it stops Tome, which is might be right. This is Kano. It's just nice that it's a blue. Um, so like it pitches 3 into your Arcane Barrier, but also with his Kano you can play it because it turns off the Tome of Aetherwind and the Fiendal Tome as well. Oh yeah, this is Kasai. It's really good. They can't draw extra cards during their turn, so they never get the discount on activating their weapons. Like all of their gold tokens, their gold is basically shut off. Same versus Victor, like also very heavy on gold and drawing extra cards, so it's not bad there either. Yeah, Prism, I already mentioned that. Very good there, and versus Brute, yeah, really good as well. And then like, and then in those matchups where, sorry, where maybe you like don't want to be particularly aggressive, like you think Besiege the Demigod is maybe not a card that you want. Like this is just a 3 block blue, so you can block 3 with it, or pitch it into your weapon. So yeah, I think this card is definitely a big incentive to play Vynnset at the moment. But yeah, the main idea, unless your opponent's doing something like a very particular, is that if you want to be aggressive and your opponent is weak to chains, then you board in like Besiege plus chains. If you want to be defensive and you think your opponent's weak to chains, then you board in Sigil plus chains. So like versus KO, that's how I sideboard. And then if chains is bad and your opponent's just doing something like fairly generic, then you board in Beseech and the Sigil, just because it's like the most generic value that's like easy to use. And that's basically how the sideboard works. So other cards in the sideboard, we have this Unhallowed Rites, which is pretty interesting. It's a one cost, 4 power, 3 block attack. You can play it from your Banner Zone if you have played a non-attack action this turn, but you don't have to. You can just play it from your hand normally, like off your Tunic. And when you play it, you can bottom a non-attack action with Blood Debt from your graveyard back into your library or back into your deck. So this lets you like recycle cards out of your graveyard back into your deck. So it's really good against fatigue, particularly because it lets you recycle this card, which is like your main tool to have big like overload bursty damage turns against fatigue. So there's a really nice synergy here, I think. Between this Unhallowed Rites and the 3 Putrid Stirrings. It just gives you more cards you can board in versus like Heavy Guardian or versus Assassin, like a similar idea. They're often very intent on fatiguing you, especially if they're Arachne. So having this as like a cheap attack that you can bring back with Codex, and then either you can play it from your Banner Zone, play it from your Arsenal, sorry, after they do that to like recycle your cards, or if they leave no witnesses you, then this gets banished and you can play it from your banner zone later. Like, yeah, it's just a very nice card to have in those fatiguey matchups. One Looming Doom, which I'm still testing again in those slower matchups. If you can build up a ton of rune chants, then this is a decent option to get with Sonata, but I'm not convinced that it's actually worth it or not. It does take a ton of setup, but it can be decent, and the floor on it is quite high because it's a blue 3-block. This card I think is kind of fine. It does a sort of similar thing as Unhallowed Rites. It's just a decent card against decks that hate blocking, because they're going to be caught in a bit of a difficult spot versus this kind of on-hit effect. The other thing is that I really like this card versus Ranger, because it's just another good attack that you can bring back when they codex you. I think it's better in that role versus Ranger than this, because versus Ranger you're not worried about fatiguing, and Ranger hates blocking, so the on-hit from this becomes more annoying. But yeah, that's a bit of a random one of, I don't know if it's really worth a slot or not. Like, if this is really just like an anti-Ranger thing, would it be better as like a Warmonger's Diplomacy or something? I mean, you can board this in versus Brute as well. Like, they don't really enjoy blocking either. So, yeah, not a bad option as a one-off maybe. And then the Reveler and Rune Blood, if you're just trying to be more aggressive and you want the like combo potential of playing this off of creepers to have a big turn, then I think 1 or 2 copies of this is probably fine. And then this is also not bad, I think. Just in the slower matchups where you can sort of maybe take one turn to sort of set it up. Like if you have this together with Sonata, then you can like Arsenal this and use this Sonata to get a Blessing of Occult to help you build up to 6 rune chance. Like, if the matchup sort of affords you that time and you're not going to be pressured whether you're going to be punished by the fact that this doesn't block, then a free 6 power ally is obviously quite strong. So I'm still think it's probably good to have this in your deck list somewhere. And then in terms of different equipment, these are just like AB versus Kano, and you probably want that AB1 versus the Runeblade Mirror as well. But yeah, these are only versus Kano. Like, you could maybe board this versus Ninjas because of the AB2, but I mean, sorry, not that AB2, the Temper 2-block. But I haven't been doing that. I think I just prefer to have the Tunic. Like, your deck can play in that very defensive way to use the Tunic counters, because you have, like, after sideboarding versus those decks, you have literally like 12 D-reacts. You have the Sigil and the Sink Below and the 2 colors of the reduced to rune chart, so you can usually find spots to use your Tunic counters, and I think that's probably a little bit better than the Temper 2 from this. So these are all just like Arcane Barrier equipments basically. Outside of the Arcane Barrier, I don't think there's a matchup where the action effect on this is better than Grasp the Arknight. Like, turn 1, Grasp is better because you can use it straight away and you still have the 3-block sitting on it. And then later in the game, Grasp is also better because you can keep reusing it over and over and over in the matchups where you like second cycle and it becomes really, really grindy. Yeah, so the Vexen Cool Hand is basically just as like a AB piece. I'm not saying you would like literally never pop it in the matchup versus Kano or something, but like it's in the list because it has AB1. And then you'll also notice that I don't even think this is 80 cards. So the inventory 19, deck 53. So how much is that? It's getting late and I can't do maths. There's what, 72, 73, 74, 75, 77. I guess the hero doesn't count as a card in your deck in Flesh and Blood, so we're missing 3 more cards we could add to our sideboard or inventory, and I'm not really exactly sure what they should be. We can go into the maybes. You could maybe play Reaping Blade as an option as well. In matchups where you think you might activate it off Tunic more. Carrion Husk might not be a bad option either, versus like Azalea or KO or things like that. Having the six block out of it is pretty strong. You can play just like Warmong's Diplomacy or cards like that if you want to hard target certain matchups, like Ranger. You can just play more random blues if you want more AB value versus Kano. This card might not be bad if you can imagine there's a matchup where you just want 6 Besiege the Demigons, basically. I think it doesn't sound unreasonable, but I'm not exactly sure where that would be so good, but it's definitely in the realm of something sensible, I think. A lot of these cards are not serious maybes, and I just have them here because I've considered playing them at one point or another. Like, I would never ever play this card. But yeah, there's very few other decent options, I think, for those last 3 slots. Like, one of these might be fine as an option for some matchup, just so that you can like Sonata for a 4 rune chance. But yeah, aside from figuring out these last few slots in my sideboard, I think this deck is pretty solid. So yeah, this is definitely not like a joke or like a meme idea. Like, I do think this might actually be the better way to build this deck. I'll just click on the results tab for like. So I think this cluster on the left here was when I was still using the like more traditional like Flail build with the puppetry and the Morvern Skies, and over here is when I sort of figured out like the build with the other weapon. So I think I haven't calculated it, but I think the win percentage over here might be slightly higher, but it's at least like comparable. So yeah, I definitely don't think that the new this new idea with the different weapon is like a silly thing or a joke at all. You can see some of the matchups here. 100% win rate in the mirror. Guardian not easy. Teklo very easy, obviously, because they can't deal with Arcane very well. Bolton mostly easy. Brute mostly easy. Prism mostly easy. Brute pretty easy. KO apparently pretty easy. Katsu feels a little bit more tricky than this would indicate, but maybe I just need more experience playing against it. Kasai pretty good. It's just hard for them to get headway when you have so many D-reacts in your list. Kano apparently quite hard. Maybe I need more blues to make my AB a bit better. Fi, yeah, feels hard. I think Ninja feels hard, but maybe it's just need more experience with the matchup. Dromai, not really sure. Dorinthia is very it's not too hard if they play like Kasai and they focus on attacking you. If they play like Giga Fatigue, like a Guardian style, then it's pretty hard for you to beat them. I mean, if they're like maxing out on all of the like Steel Blade chance and they're always ABing you every turn and things like that, then it becomes a hard matchup. And it's hard to know exactly what your opponent's plan will be from the outset. Like, you don't even know what weapon Dorinthia could be playing. I've even played against one of these people was using the hatchet, let alone the Dawnblade or the Great Axe. Dash, also very hard, similar issue. Don't really know how hard they're going to be trying to fatigue you, but you sort of have to like hedge against fatigue when you play against these heroes, because it's just too tricky to beat them when they're playing like that ultra defensive fatiguey way. Bravo, similar bad win rate. Azalea, yeah, it's like similar to ninjas, where like the matchups that pressure you a lot always don't feel that good, but maybe it's closer than it seems. And Arachne, similar issue, where like if they're trying really hard to fatigue you, it can be a bit of a problem. But I like the matchups right now versus Brutes and Prism, which seem quite popular, and against the matchups we don't seem to have any special particular strong interaction, like Bolton or like Azuri or whatever. It seems to be doing quite good as well. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with this list, I think, and I think this is definitely a valid way to build the hero, like zero Morgan Skies, zero Shadow Puppetry. Um, and if you don't believe me, whatever, I would at least recommend you give it a try, because it feels to me a lot more comfortable and better to play compared to the version with Flail of Agony. So I'm definitely going to be fine tuning this a little bit moving forward and trying to figure out what are the last few cards I want to play as. But yeah, that will be all for today. Thank you for watching. Let me know what you think of this idea in the comments. This has been Life ITCG signing out.